Admiral Zephyra stood on the bridge of the Galactic Council's flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching the holographic display show dozens of sleek alien warships arranged in perfect formation. The massive vessels gleamed like silver daggers against the star-filled void, each one a testament to thousands of years of military evolution across the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. "Magnificent, aren't they?" she said to the human delegation standing nearby, her voice carrying the subtle pride that came with commanding the most powerful fleet in known space. The hologram rotated slowly, highlighting the elegant curves of Zephyrin destroyers, the imposing bulk of Karani dreadnoughts, and the razor-sharp silhouettes of Vex-TIE stealth cruisers. Captain Sarah Chin of the Terran Colonial Navy nodded politely, though her expression remained carefully neutral. Behind her, Commander Rodriguez and Lieutenant Thompson maintained the same diplomatic composure they'd been trained to display during first contact protocols. The three humans looked almost primitive in their simple blue uniforms compared to the elaborate ceremonial armor worn by the various alien officers present. "They're certainly impressive," Sarah replied, choosing her words carefully. The universal translator embedded in her collar converted her English into the standard Galactic Council dialect, though she suspected some nuances were lost in translation. Zephyra's four eyes gleamed with satisfaction. The Zephyrin Admiral was nearly 8 feet tall, with crystalline skin that reflected the bridge's ambient light in prismatic patterns. Her race had dominated galactic naval warfare for over 3 millennia, and she took great pleasure in demonstrating their technological superiority to newcomers. "Each of these vessels represents the pinnacle of military engineering from our respective civilizations," she continued, gesturing toward the display with one of her forearms. "The Shadowbane there can phase through solid matter. The World Render carries enough firepower to crack a planet's crust. And my own ship's quantum shields can withstand the core temperature of a star for several minutes." The other alien dignitaries murmured their agreement. General Kor, a massive reptilian being from the Karani Empire, nodded his scaled head approvingly. "Indeed. Your species shows promise, humans, but you must understand the vast gulf that separates your current capabilities from true galactic-class warfare." Captain Chen maintained her diplomatic smile, though those who knew her well might have noticed the slight tightening around her eyes. "We're always eager to learn from more experienced civilizations." "Excellent attitude," boomed Admiral Fexnor of the Hegemony Fleet. The insectoid commander's mandibles clicked appreciatively. "It took my people 2,000 years to develop our current bioship technology. Your species has only been spacefaring for what, 2 centuries? Perhaps in another few millennia, you'll be ready to contribute meaningfully to galactic defense." The condescension was thick enough to cut with a knife, but the human delegation endured it with practiced patience. They'd been briefed extensively on galactic politics during their 3-month journey to the Council Station. Humanity was the newest member of the Galactic Council, barely accepted due to their rapid expansion and some impressive diplomatic maneuvering by their ambassadors. But, militarily, they were considered little more than a curiosity. "We appreciate the opportunity to observe your fleets," Sarah said. "Perhaps you'd be interested in seeing some of our vessels as well?" The suggestion caused a ripple of what might charitably be called polite interest among the assembled aliens. Admiral Zephyra's crystalline features shifted into what passed for an indulgent smile among her people. "Of course, dear Captain. We'd be delighted to see what humanity has managed to accomplish in such a short time. Do you have a few ships in the area?" "Actually, we brought our 3rd fleet for the diplomatic mission," Sarah replied casually. "They're stationed just outside the system's gravity well, awaiting permission to approach." This caused a stir among the alien officers. Fleet Admiral Veltar of the Nexus Coalition, a being that looked like a living aurora contained within a humanoid energy field, flickered with surprise. "An entire fleet? For a diplomatic mission?" "We believe in being thorough," Commander Rodriguez interjected with a slight grin. Zephyra waved a dismissive hand. "Well, by all means, let's see what Earth's finest can produce. I'm sure they'll be educational." The tone suggested she expected to see something equivalent to ancient wooden sailing ships compared to modern spacecraft. The other aliens shared knowing looks, already preparing to offer gentle encouragement to the primitive newcomers. "Admiral Zephyra, would you be willing to grant our fleet permission to enter the system?" Sarah asked formally. "Granted. Your ships may approach under peaceful intent." Sarah tapped her communicator. "Chen to Admiral Harrison. You have permission to bring the fleet in system." "Acknowledged, Captain. 3rd Fleet beginning approach now. ETA 15 minutes." As they waited, the aliens continued to showcase their various technologies. General Kor demonstrated his flagship's ability to reconfigure its hull plating for different combat scenarios. Admiral Thexnor showed off the organic healing capabilities of his bioships, watching with obvious pride as damaged sections of hull regenerated within moments. "Your turn will come soon enough," Zephyra told the humans patronizingly. "Though I suspect your vessels might seem rather quaint compared to what you've seen today." Lieutenant Thompson, who had been quietly taking notes throughout the demonstration, looked up with genuine curiosity. "Admiral, if you don't mind me asking, what's the largest single ship in your combined fleets?" Zephyra preened. "That would be the Karani Super Dreadnought Godslayer. 30 kilometers long, home to 250,000 crew members, and capable of devastating entire star systems." General Kor's pride and joy. The massive reptilian commander's chest swelled with obvious satisfaction. "Indeed. She is the largest warship ever constructed by any civilization in this galaxy. Her construction required the resources of 12 worlds and took over a century to complete." "Impressive," Thompson said, making another note. "Our largest ship clocks in at about 43 kilometers." The casual statement hit the assembled aliens like a physical blow. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Several officers turned to stare at the young human lieutenant as if he'd just claimed to breathe vacuum. 43. Admiral Zephyra repeated slowly. "Kilometers?" "Yes, ma'am. The UES Leviathan. Though she's technically classified as a mobile command platform rather than a traditional warship." General Kor's massive frame seemed to deflate slightly. That would make it nearly 50% larger than the Godslayer." "Size isn't everything, of course," Sarah said diplomatically, though there was a hint of amusement in her voice. "I'm sure your ships are far more advanced in other areas." Before anyone could respond, the ship's sensors began registering new contacts. The main display automatically shifted to show long-range sensor readings as the human fleet approached. At first, there were just a few blips on the edge of detection range. "How many ships did you say you brought?" Fleet Admiral Veltar asked, his energy form flickering more rapidly than before. "The Third Fleet," Sarah replied. "About standard size for a human deep space formation." The sensor contacts continued to multiply. Dozens became hundreds. Hundreds became thousands. The display automatically zoomed out to accommodate the massive formation approaching the system, and still the contacts kept appearing. "This is impossible," whispered Admiral Thexnor, his mandibles clicking in agitation. "No single fleet could contain this many vessels." "Actually, Admiral, the Third Fleet is one of our smaller formations," Commander Rodriguez said helpfully. "The First and Second Fleets are nearly twice as large, and that's not counting the home defense forces." The aliens stared at the display in growing disbelief. The approaching human fleet wasn't just large, it was incomprehensibly vast. Ships of every conceivable size and configuration filled the sensor screen, from tiny fighters and corvettes to massive capital ships that dwarfed even the largest vessels in the Galactic Council's combined forces. "How many ships?" General Kor demanded, his reptilian features pale with shock. Lieutenant Thompson consulted his notes again. Third Fleet currently consists of 12,467 combat vessels, plus support ships, logistics vessels, and auxiliary craft. Total formation strength is approximately 18,000 individual ships. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. The combined might of the entire Galactic Council represented perhaps 3,000 major warships, accumulated over millennia of expansion by dozens of advanced civilizations. The humans had just casually mentioned bringing 18,000 ships for a diplomatic mission. That's larger than the combined fleets of the entire Karani Empire," General Kor said weakly. "Larger than any fleet in galactic history," Admiral Zephyra added, her crystalline skin flickering with what might have been fear. As the human formation drew closer, details became visible on the main display. The alien officers crowded around the holographic projector, trying to process what they were seeing. The ships didn't follow any familiar design philosophy. Where alien vessels favored elegant curves or brutal angular lines, human ships looked functional, almost industrial. They bristled with weapon systems, sensor arrays, and launch bays. Many showed obvious signs of battle damage that had been repaired rather than replaced, giving them a scarred, veteran appearance. "Those markings," Admiral Thexnor said, pointing at symbols visible on several of the larger ships. "What do they represent?" Sarah followed his gaze to where several massive dreadnoughts bore elaborate nose art and kill tallies painted on their hulls. Campaign ribbons and battle honors. That's the UES Indomitable. She fought in the Centauri War, the Vegan conflict, and the Proxima Rebellion. The markings show which battles the ship and crew participated in. Battles? Fleet Admiral Veltar's energy form pulsed uncertainly. Your species fights among itself? We've had our differences, Sarah admitted. But we tend to work them out eventually. The understatement was massive. Humanity's expansion into space had been marked by nearly constant warfare. Colonial rebellions, corporate conflicts, resource wars, territorial disputes, and ideological struggles had shaped human military doctrine for 2 centuries. While the aliens had developed their impressive technologies during long periods of peace and stability, humans had forged their fleet capabilities in the crucible of endless conflict. The design philosophy is fascinating, Admiral Zephyrus said, trying to recover her composure. Very practical. What she didn't say was that the human ships looked like they'd been built by people who expected to use them. A lot. The wear patterns, the modular construction, the obvious redundancy in critical systems, everything suggested a military force that had been designed for sustained combat operations rather than ceremonial displays of power. Admiral Harrison's ship should be visible soon, Commander Rodriguez said, checking his own display. The UES Prometheus. She's our fleet flagship. When the Prometheus finally came into visual range, the assembled aliens fell silent. The ship was enormous, easily matching the size of the largest vessels in their combined fleets, but it looked nothing like the sleek, elegant designs they were accustomed to. The human flagship was a massive, angular construction that seemed to have been assembled from interlocking geometric shapes. Its hull was dark gray, almost black, and covered with what looked like millions of tiny details: weapon mounts, sensor clusters, launch bays, communication arrays. She's beautiful, Lieutenant Thompson said with obvious pride. The aliens weren't sure they agreed, but they couldn't deny the ship's presence. The Prometheus radiated menace the way their own vessels radiated elegance. This was a ship built for one purpose: war. How many crew aboard the flagship? General Corps asked reluctantly. About 2.5 million, Sarah replied. Plus another 500,000 Marines and support personnel. 3 million people on a single ship. The number was staggering. The entire crew complement of Admiral Zephyrus' task force barely reached 1 million beings spread across dozens of vessels. As the human fleet settled into formation around the diplomatic station, the aliens found themselves reassessing everything they thought they knew about their newest council member. The sleek, beautiful ships of the galactic powers suddenly looked delicate and almost decorative compared to the massive, scarred, and obviously functional human armada. Admiral Zephyrus, came a voice over the communication system. This is Admiral Harrison aboard the UES Prometheus. Permission to come aboard for the diplomatic reception? Zephyrus managed to compose herself enough to respond. Of course, Admiral. We look forward to meeting you. As Admiral Harrison's shuttle approached the Eternal Dominion, the alien commanders found themselves in the unfamiliar position of feeling inadequate. They'd spent the day showing off their most advanced technologies, their most powerful weapons, their most impressive ships. But, faced with the sheer scale and obvious combat experience of the human fleet, their own vessels suddenly seemed like museum pieces. Captain Chen, Admiral Zephyrus said quietly, perhaps you could tell us more about human fleet operations? Sarah smiled, and, for the first time since boarding the alien flagship, it was completely genuine. I'd be happy to, Admiral. Though I should warn you, we've learned to think about warfare a bit differently than most species. As Admiral Harrison's shuttle docked and the human fleet commander prepared to join the diplomatic reception, the aliens realized they were about to get a very different education than they'd planned to provide. They'd expected to demonstrate galactic superiority to primitive newcomers. Instead, they found themselves facing a species that had somehow managed to build the largest, most experienced military force in known galactic history. The reception was about to become very interesting indeed. Admiral Harrison stepped onto the bridge of the Eternal Dominion with the confident stride of someone accustomed to command. Unlike the diplomatic delegation that had preceded him, Harrison wore full military dress uniform, dark blue with silver trim, adorned with ribbons and decorations that spoke of a long and distinguished career. He was a large man, even by human standards, with gray hair and the kind of weathered features that came from spending decades in deep space. The assembled alien dignitaries watched him approach with a mixture of curiosity and newly acquired respect. The sheer size of the human fleet had fundamentally altered the dynamic of the meeting, and everyone present knew it. "Admiral Zephyra," Harrison said, offering a crisp salute. "Thank you for hosting this diplomatic exchange. I apologize for the size of our escort, we weren't entirely sure what to expect." Zephyra returned the salute with her own species gesture, though her movements seemed less assured than they had been earlier. "Not at all, Admiral. We're impressed by the scale of your operations." Harrison glanced at the main display, where his fleet was still settling into defensive formations around the station. Thousands of ships moved with practiced precision, each finding its assigned position in a complex three-dimensional pattern that spoke of extensive training and experience. "The Third Fleet's been together for about 8 years now," he said conversationally. "Good crews. They know their business." General Kor cleared his throat, his massive frame still slightly hunched from the psychological impact of seeing his prized super-dreadnought dwarfed by human vessels. "Admiral, if you don't mind the question, how does your species support such a massive military force? The logistics alone must be staggering." Harrison nodded approvingly. "Good question, General. Logistics is the foundation of any effective military operation. We learned that the hard way during the early colonial wars." He gestured toward the display, where supply ships could be seen moving between the larger vessels in constant streams of activity. Every major fleet unit is designed to be essentially self-sufficient for extended periods. The Prometheus carries her own manufacturing facilities, mining equipment, agricultural systems, and population centers. She's not just a warship, she's a mobile civilization. Admiral Fexnor's compound eyes focused intently on the human commander. "Population centers? You have civilians aboard your military vessels?" "Families," Harrison confirmed. "Most of our deep space crews serve 10-year rotations. Hard to maintain morale and unit cohesion if you separate people from their loved ones for a decade at a time. The Prometheus has residential districts, schools, parks, entertainment facilities, everything needed to maintain a stable community." The concept was alien to most of the assembled officers. Their own military traditions emphasized short-term deployments and professional separation between civilian and military spheres. The idea of warships serving as complete societies was both fascinating and disturbing. Fleet Admiral Veltar's energy form pulsed with confusion. "But surely this makes your vessels vulnerable? Civilians in combat zones?" Harrison's expression hardened slightly. "Admiral, humanity has been fighting for survival in deep space for 2 centuries. We learned early that there's no such thing as a safe rear area when your enemy can attack anywhere, anytime. Our families share our risks because they share our mission." "And what mission is that?" asked Admiral Zephyra. "Survival," Harrison said simply. "And the protection of human civilization wherever it exists." Captain Chen stepped forward to elaborate. "Admiral, perhaps you could explain the hegemony wars to our new colleagues?" Harrison nodded grimly. "The hegemony wars were our introduction to the realities of interstellar conflict. About 30 years ago, an alliance of human colonies declared independence from Earth government. What started as a political dispute escalated into a full-scale civil war that lasted 15 years and involved every human settlement in known space." He paused, collecting his thoughts. The hegemony, the rebel alliance, had some early advantages. They controlled several key industrial worlds and had significant popular support. Earth's response was to mobilize everything we had. "Everything?" General Kor asked. "Every ship, every resource, every person capable of contributing to the war effort," Harrison confirmed. "We built the first fleet carriers, developed our mobile command platforms, and created the doctrine of total space warfare. By the end of the conflict, we had over 50,000 active warships and a military-industrial complex that spanned hundreds of worlds. The numbers hung in the air like a physical presence. 50,000 warships in a single conflict between human factions. The entire Galactic Council could barely field 5,000 ships if every member civilization contributed their full strength." Admiral Fexnor's mandibles clicked nervously. "And the result?" "Stalemate," Captain Chen said. "After 15 years of warfare, both sides were exhausted. The peace treaty established the current federal system, greater autonomy for colonial governments in exchange for unified defense and foreign policy. But the fleets remained," Commander Rodriguez added. The war taught us that space is a dangerous place. We needed to be ready for whatever came next. Admiral Zephyra studied the human officers with new understanding. This explains your ship designs. They're built for sustained combat operations. Every human vessel is designed to fight outnumbered and, far from support, Harrison confirmed. We learned to build redundancy into everything, to make our ships and crews as self-reliant as possible. A human destroyer can operate independently for months if necessary. To demonstrate his point, Harrison activated his personal communicator. Harrison to Captain Martinez aboard the Defiant. Show our guests your ship's capabilities. On the main display, one of the smaller human vessels, barely a kilometer long, began to transform. Modular sections repositioned themselves, revealing hidden weapon systems and defensive installations. Within minutes, the destroyer had reconfigured itself from a sleek patrol vessel into a bristling fortress. Modular construction, Harrison explained. Every human warship can adapt to different mission requirements in real time. Combat, exploration, convoy escort, planetary bombardment, fleet support, one ship, multiple roles. General Corps stared at the display in amazement. The engineering complexity must be incredible. It is, Harrison admitted. But it's also necessary. We can't afford to build single-purpose vessels when our next conflict might require capabilities we haven't anticipated. Lieutenant Thompson consulted his ever-present notes. Admiral, would you like to show them the planetary defense systems? Harrison grinned, and the expression wasn't entirely pleasant. Might as well. Computer, display current defensive positions for Earth, Mars, Titan, and Europa. The holographic display shifted to show the inner solar system. What the aliens saw defied comprehension. Earth wasn't just protected by orbital platforms and patrol fleets, it was surrounded by a vast network of defensive installations that turned the entire star system into a fortress. Thousands of battle stations, millions of automated weapon platforms, and countless fleets of robotic defenders created layers of protection that extended well beyond the orbit of Jupiter. This is just our home system, Harrison said casually. Every major human world has similar defenses. How? Admiral Zephyra managed to ask. How do you maintain such massive defensive networks? Automation and artificial intelligence, Commander Rodriguez explained. We developed advanced AI systems during the Hegemony Wars. They handle most routine operations, maintenance, and threat assessment. Human crews only take direct control during major operations or when creative thinking is required. The implications were staggering. The aliens were looking at a civilization that had essentially militarized its entire society and economy in response to internal conflict, then maintained that military posture as a matter of survival doctrine. Every human world was a fortress, every human fleet was a self-contained war machine, and every human citizen was, in some sense, a member of the military structure. Admiral Fexnor voiced what everyone was thinking. Your species lives in a constant state of war readiness. Not war readiness, Harrison corrected. War capability. There's a difference. We hope for peace, but we prepare for conflict. Experience has taught us that the galaxy can be a dangerous place. But, surely, Admiral Zephyr said, with your technological capabilities and military strength, you must dominate any conflicts you encounter? Harrison and Captain Chen exchanged glances. There was something in their expressions that made the assembled aliens uneasy. Admiral, Sarah said carefully, there's something you should understand about human military doctrine. We don't fight to dominate. We fight to survive. The difference being? Fleet Admiral Veltar asked. When you fight to dominate, you need to win decisively and, then, maintain control, Harrison explained. When you fight to survive, you need to make the cost of attacking you so high that no rational enemy would consider it worthwhile. He gestured toward the display showing the massive human fleet. Every ship you see here has been built with one primary purpose, to make any aggressor regret their decisions so thoroughly that they never consider attacking humanity again. Deterrence through overwhelming force? General Corps suggested. Deterrence through demonstrated capability, Captain Chen corrected. We don't threaten people with what we might do. We show them what we can do and let them draw their own conclusions. To illustrate the point, Harrison activated another display showing human exploration routes. Red lines traced paths through space that revealed the true scope of human expansion. Hundreds of colony worlds, thousands of mining operations, entire sectors of space under human control or influence. In the past 50 years, we've encountered 17 different hostile alien species, Harrison said matter-of-factly. Pirates, slavers, territorial aggressors, religious fanatics, the usual variety of problems you find when expanding into unknown space. The casual tone was more unsettling than any boast could have been. 17 hostile alien species. The Galactic Council had encountered perhaps half a dozen truly aggressive civilizations in their entire recorded history, and those encounters had shaped galactic politics for millennia. What happened to these hostile species? Admiral Zephyra asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. 6 were completely eliminated as military threats, Harrison replied without emotion. 5 agreed to non-aggression treaties after demonstration of our capabilities. 3 were absorbed into human space as autonomous regions after their governments requested protection from other threats. 2 are still actively hostile but have been contained within their original territories. 1 turned out to be a misunderstanding, they're now trading partners. The clinical recitation of galactic conquest disguised as self-defense left the alien officers speechless. This wasn't the behavior of a primitive newcomer to galactic politics. This was the track record of an apex predator that had systematically neutralized every threat it encountered during its expansion. Contained? General Kor asked weakly. The Razak hegemony and the Void cult, Commander Rodriguez said, consulting his own notes. Both species were aggressively expansionist and had already wiped out several smaller civilizations. We established quarantine zones around their territories and made it clear that any expansion attempts would be met with immediate military response. They tested the quarantine 3 times, Lieutenant Thompson added helpfully. They stopped testing it after the 3rd demonstration. Admiral Fexnor's mandibles clicked rapidly. Demonstration? The complete destruction of their primary assault fleets, Harrison said simply. We find that practical demonstrations are more effective than verbal threats. The aliens were beginning to understand that they weren't dealing with typical galactic newcomers. Most species that achieved interstellar travel did so during periods of peace and technological advancement. They explored space with wonder and curiosity, gradually building diplomatic relationships with other civilizations they encountered. Humanity had fought their way to the stars and continued fighting every step of their expansion. They'd encountered the galaxy not as naive explorers but as hardened survivors who'd already proven their willingness and ability to destroy anyone who threatened their existence. Admiral Harrison, Admiral Zephyra said carefully, your species' approach to galactic relations is unique. We prefer to think of it as practical, Harrison replied. We've found that most conflicts can be avoided if potential aggressors understand the true cost of aggression. And if they don't understand? Fleet Admiral Veltar asked. Harrison's smile was cold. Then, we educate them. The conversation was interrupted by an alert from the Prometheus. Admiral Harrison's communicator chimed, and his fleet commander's voice came through clearly. Admiral, long-range sensors are detecting an unscheduled arrival at the system's edge. Multiple contacts, configuration unknown, approaching at high speed. The bridge of the Eternal Dominion suddenly became very quiet. Harrison stepped toward the main display, his casual demeanor replaced by focused alertness. IFF signals, he asked. Negative, sir. No response to communication attempts. Configuration doesn't match any known galactic species. Admiral Zephyra moved to her own command station. Admiral Harrison, these are neutral waters. Perhaps we should attempt diplomatic contact before she stopped speaking as the sensor readings updated. The approaching ships weren't responding to hails because they were already charging weapons and accelerating to attack speed. Admiral, came another voice from the human fleet, tactical analysis suggests hostile intent. Multiple energy signatures consistent with pre-attack positioning. Harrison nodded grimly. Alert status, Admiral Zephyra. Your station may be under attack. The aliens looked at each other uncertainly. In their experience, conflicts began with lengthy diplomatic exchanges, formal declarations, and careful positioning over weeks or months. The idea that unknown hostiles would simply arrive and immediately commence attacks seemed almost impossible. Surely they'll attempt communication first? Admiral Zephyra said hopefully. Harrison was already issuing orders to his fleet. Third Fleet, assume defensive formation around the station. All ships to combat alert. prepare for immediate engagement. 18,000 human warships began moving with deadly precision, their earlier casual formation transforming into an intricate defensive network around the diplomatic station. The transformation took less than 3 minutes. Admiral Harrison, General Corps said urgently, "Perhaps this is a misunderstanding. Maybe we should try to establish communication before assuming hostile intent." Harrison looked at the massive reptilian officer with something approaching pity. "General, in my experience, when unknown ships approach a peaceful gathering with charged weapons and refuse all communication attempts, they're not coming to talk." The sensor readings updated again. The approaching fleet was massive, nearly 1,000 ships of unknown configuration, all maintaining attack formation and weapons lock. "Admiral Zephyra," Harrison said formally, "I'm assuming defense of this station and all personnel aboard. Do you have any objections?" For a moment, Admiral Zephyra hesitated. Accepting human protection would be an admission that her own forces were inadequate for defense. But, looking at the approaching threat and the speed with which the human fleet had responded, she made the only logical choice. "No objections, Admiral. We're placing ourselves under your protection." Harrison nodded and activated his fleet communications. "All ships, weapons free. Unknown hostiles are approaching a peaceful diplomatic gathering. Protect the station and all friendly vessels. Rules of engagement are weapons hot. Anything that shoots at us or the station is a valid target." The response from 18,000 human warships was immediate and unified. "Acknowledged, Admiral. Weapons free." As the unknown fleet closed to weapon range, the aliens aboard the Eternal Dominion were about to see exactly what 2 centuries of constant warfare had taught the human race about ship-to-ship combat. The unknown fleet dropped out of hyperspace like a plague of locusts, their dark ships immediately spreading into attack formation. The vessels were unlike anything in the galactic databases, organic-looking constructions that seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. Their hulls were black as the void between stars, and they moved with an unsettling fluid motion that suggested biotechnology rather than traditional engineering. "Analysis coming in from Fleet Intelligence," Harrison reported, listening to updates through his command communicator. "Ships appear to be biomechanical hybrids. No match to any known species in our databases or Galactic Council records." Admiral Zephyra stared at the tactical display in growing horror. The approaching fleet vastly outnumbered her combined forces, and their energy signatures indicated weapons systems far beyond anything the Galactic Council had ever encountered. "Over 900 vessels," she whispered. "Admiral Harrison, even with your fleet, we're outnumbered nearly 2 to 1. Harrison glanced at the display and shrugged. "I've fought worse odds." The casual response sent chills down the spines of every alien present. This human admiral was looking at a massive enemy fleet and treating it as a routine military problem to be solved. "Commander Rodriguez," Harrison said, turning to his staff officer. "Deploy screening formations and begin long-range reconnaissance. I want to know everything about these ships before they get close enough to do damage." "Already in progress, Admiral," Rodriguez replied, monitoring his own tactical display. "Scout squadrons are moving to optimal sensor range. First analysis should be available within 2 minutes." The speed of human military response was breathtaking. While the aliens were still trying to process the magnitude of the threat, the human fleet had already begun implementing complex defensive strategies. Ships were moving into position with mechanical precision, sensor arrays were focusing on the approaching enemy, and weapon systems were coming online across thousands of vessels. "Incoming transmission," announced the communication officer aboard the Eternal Dominion. "Unknown fleet is attempting to establish contact." "Put it through," Admiral Zephyra ordered, hoping for some diplomatic resolution to the crisis. The main display flickered and resolved into an image that made several of the alien officers step back in shock. The creature on screen was vaguely humanoid but clearly predatory, with multiple rows of razor-sharp teeth and eyes that glowed with an unsettling red light. Its skin appeared to be some kind of chitinous armor, and tubes and cables connected various parts of its body to the ship's systems. "Attention inferior beings," the creature said, its voice a rasping hiss that the universal translators struggled to process. "I am War Prime Thak of the Devourer Fleet. You will surrender your vessels and prepare for consumption. Resistance will only make your eventual absorption more painful." The transmission cut off, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. "Well," Harrison said cheerfully, "that answers the diplomacy question." General Corps' massive frame was trembling slightly. "Did it say consumption?" Biological harvesters, Lieutenant Thompson confirmed, reading from his scanner. Ship configurations suggest they're designed to capture and process organic material. Probably a species that converts conquered populations into biofuel or raw materials. The clinical analysis of their impending fate didn't improve anyone's mood. Admiral Fexnor's compound eyes focused on Harrison with desperate hope. "Admiral, surely even your fleet can't stand against such overwhelming numbers?" Harrison was studying the tactical display with professional interest. "Actually, this is shaping up to be a fairly straightforward engagement. Enemy fleet is maintaining predictable formation, no evidence of advanced tactical doctrine, and their approach vector suggests they're not familiar with human combat methodologies." Straightforward? Admiral Zephyra couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Admiral, there are nearly 1,000 enemy vessels approaching." "Quantity has a quality all its own," Harrison admitted. "But quality has a quantity all its own, too." To demonstrate his point, he activated the fleet communication system. "All task force commanders, this is Admiral Harrison. We have approximately 900 hostile bioships approaching in standard swarm formation. Enemy capabilities unknown but presumed significant. Rules of engagement are simple: protect the diplomatic station and eliminate all hostile vessels." Questions? The responses came back immediately from across the human fleet. Task force commanders acknowledged the situation and reported ready status with the calm professionalism of officers who'd done this many times before. "Task Force Alpha ready for engagement, Admiral. Task Force Beta in position and standing by. Task Force Gamma requests permission to begin preemptive reconnaissance in force. Task Force Delta reporting all weapon systems online and targeting solutions locked." The litany of ready reports continued from dozens of task force commanders, each representing hundreds of ships and millions of crew members. The human fleet wasn't just large, it was organized into a sophisticated command structure that could coordinate complex operations across vast distances. "Permission granted, Task Force Gamma," Harrison replied. "Begin advanced reconnaissance. Rules of engagement are weapons hot if fired upon." Task Force Gamma consisted of nearly 500 fast attack vessels and reconnaissance ships. They accelerated toward the enemy formation with breathtaking speed, their drives pushing them to velocities that made the alien observers gasp in amazement. Admiral Zephyr said urgently, "You're sending 500 ships directly into a superior enemy force." "I'm sending 500 scouts to gather intelligence," Harrison corrected. "They're not engaging unless attacked first." As Task Force Gamma closed on the Devourer fleet, the enemy response was swift and predictable. The bioships opened fire with energy weapons that painted space in brilliant colors, targeting the approaching human vessels with obvious hostile intent. "Enemy has opened fire on reconnaissance units," reported the fleet intelligence officer. "Task Force Gamma is engaging." What followed was unlike anything the alien observers had ever witnessed. The human reconnaissance ships didn't retreat or attempt to avoid combat. Instead, they spread into a complex three-dimensional formation and began systematically dismantling the enemy's forward elements with clinical precision. The bioships were fast and their weapons were powerful, but they fought like predators accustomed to overwhelming weaker prey. The human vessels fought like professionals who'd spent centuries perfecting the art of space combat. Every movement was calculated, every shot was precisely aimed, and every tactical decision was based on detailed analysis of enemy capabilities. "First analysis complete," Commander Rodriguez announced. "Enemy weapons are primarily energy-based, moderate penetration capability against our standard armor. Ship hulls appear to be self-repairing but vulnerable to sustained kinetic bombardment. Propulsion systems show weak points at junction nodes between organic and mechanical components." Harrison nodded approvingly. "Time to engagement?" "For minutes until enemy fleet enters optimal firing range for our main batteries. All task forces, implement Pattern 7. Standard anti-swarm tactics." The human fleet began to transform again, but this time the change was far more dramatic. Instead of a defensive formation around the diplomatic station, the ships arranged themselves into a massive three-dimensional grid that extended for millions of kilometers in every direction. Each task force took position at specific coordinates, creating overlapping fields of fire that would channel the enemy fleet into predetermined killing zones. "Pattern 7? Admiral Fexnor asked, his mandibles clicking nervously. "Anti-swarm doctrine," Captain Chen explained. We developed it during the hegemony wars to deal with large numbers of smaller vessels. The basic principle is to force the enemy into engagement zones where our superior firepower and coordination can defeat them in detail. The Devourer fleet was approaching fast, their bioships pulsing with malevolent energy as they prepared to overwhelm what they perceived as a relatively small defender force. Their formation suggested they intended to surround the human fleet and attack from all directions simultaneously. "Enemy fleet entering engagement range in 60 seconds, reported the tactical officer. All human vessels report ready for combat." Harrison activated the fleet-wide communication system one final time. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have hostile bioships approaching with clear intent to attack this diplomatic station and everyone aboard. Our mission is simple: protect the innocents and eliminate the threat. Show these creatures what happens when they threaten humanity and our allies." The response from 18,000 human warships was immediate and overwhelming. "Acknowledged, Admiral." For humanity. As the enemy fleet entered optimal firing range, the aliens aboard the Eternal Dominion witnessed the true meaning of human naval warfare. The opening salvo from the human fleet was a coordinated barrage involving thousands of ships firing simultaneously. The sheer volume of weapons fire turned space itself into a brilliant aurora of destruction. The bioships had expected to face the elegant, precise weapons of traditional galactic navies. Instead, they encountered something entirely different: the devastating firepower of a military force that had been designed to fight total wars against equally capable enemies. Human weapons didn't rely on elegant energy beams or sophisticated targeting systems. They used overwhelming kinetic force, sustained bombardment, and weapons designed to destroy enemy vessels as quickly and efficiently as possible. Railgun slugs accelerated to significant fractions of light speed tore through bioship hulls like paper. Missile swarms containing thousands of warheads overwhelmed enemy point defenses. Particle beams designed for planetary bombardment vaporized entire sections of enemy vessels. The first wave of the Devourer fleet simply disappeared. Nearly 200 bioships were destroyed in the opening 30 seconds of combat, their organic hulls unable to withstand the concentrated firepower of human naval artillery. "Impossible," Warprime Thak's voice crackled over the communication system. "No species possesses such destructive capability." "You're learning," Harrison replied calmly. "I suggest you withdraw while you still can." The Devourer fleet's response was to attack with even greater fury. The remaining bioships accelerated to ramming speed, attempting to close with the human vessels before their devastating weapons could completely destroy the fleet. It was exactly the wrong tactical decision. As the enemy ships committed to close-range engagement, the human fleet activated the second phase of Pattern 7. Task forces that had been positioned around the perimeter of the engagement zone began to collapse inward, creating multiple layers of crossfire that caught the attacking bioships in overlapping kill zones. "Task Force Delta, begin rolling bombardment," Harrison ordered. "Task Force Echo, implement close support protocol. All fighter wings, launch and engage." The space around the diplomatic station became a three-dimensional nightmare of weapons fire and exploding ships. Human task forces moved with perfect coordination, each unit supporting the others in a complex dance of destruction that systematically dismantled the Devourer fleet. The bioships fought with desperate fury, their energy weapons clawing at human vessels with increasing desperation. But, for every human ship damaged, dozens of bioships were destroyed. The technological and tactical superiority of the human fleet was so overwhelming that the outcome was never really in doubt. Admiral Zephyrus said in amazement, "Your losses are minimal." "Good training, good equipment, and good tactics," Harrison replied, monitoring the tactical display. "Plus we've been doing this for a long time." As the battle progressed, the aliens began to understand what they were witnessing. This wasn't just military superiority, it was the demonstration of a completely different approach to warfare. The Galactic Council races had developed their military capabilities during long periods of peace, with conflicts resolved through limited engagements and diplomatic maneuvering. Humanity had been forged in the crucible of total war. Every human vessel, every weapon system, every tactical doctrine had been tested and refined through decades of continuous combat against determined enemies. The result was a military force that didn't just fight wars, it won them with terrifying efficiency. "Enemy fleet strength down to 60%, Commander Rodriguez reported. Remaining vessels are attempting to disengage." "Negative," Harrison said firmly. "They initiated hostilities against a peaceful diplomatic gathering." Standard doctrine applies: pursue and destroy. We cannot allow this fleet to threaten other innocent civilizations. The human fleet began the final phase of the engagement: pursuit and destruction of the fleeing enemy vessels. Human ships were faster, better coordinated, and far more experienced in this type of operation. The bioships that had seemed so terrifying when they first appeared were now desperately trying to escape the methodical destruction of the human naval formation. Warprime back to human fleet, came a transmission from the largest remaining bioship. We withdraw. We acknowledge your superiority and will not return. Harrison considered the offer for a moment, then shook his head. Negative, Warprime. You attacked peaceful beings without provocation. Surrender is no longer an option. You cannot destroy us all, the alien commander screamed. We are the Devourer fleet. We have consumed 1,000 worlds. Then, it's time someone stopped you, Harrison replied coldly. The final phase of the battle lasted another 20 minutes. When it was over, the Devourer fleet had been completely eliminated. Nearly 1,000 bioships had been reduced to scattered debris and expanding clouds of vaporized organic matter. Not a single enemy vessel escaped. The human fleet reported minimal casualties, fewer than a dozen ships had suffered significant damage, and total personnel losses were under 500 across the entire 18,000 ship formation. As the human vessels began recovery operations and damage assessment, the aliens aboard the Eternal Dominion found themselves struggling to process what they had witnessed. 1,000-ship enemy fleet had been destroyed in less than an hour by a human formation that had treated the engagement as a routine military exercise. Admiral Harrison, Admiral Zephyrus said quietly, that was the most efficient military operation I have ever witnessed. Harrison nodded acknowledgement. The Third Fleet is good at their job. They'd had plenty of practice. General Corps was staring at the tactical display where human ships were already returning to their pre-battle formations. Admiral, how many species like the Devourers have you encountered? Including today? 18 different aggressive civilizations, Harrison replied. Though the Devourers were larger than most. Usually, we encounter raiding fleets of a few hundred ships at most. And the outcome is always the same? Fleet Admiral Veltar asked. Harrison's smile was grim. Always. We've found that word travels fast in hostile circles. Most aggressive species get the message after seeing what happened to their predecessors. As the human fleet completed its post-battle procedures and prepared to resume diplomatic operations, the aliens realized they were looking at more than just a powerful military force. They were seeing the end result of a species that had taken a fundamentally different path to the stars, a path marked by constant conflict, continuous adaptation, and an absolute commitment to protecting their own survival and that of any allies who earned their trust. The demonstration was complete, but its implications would reshape galactic politics for generations to come. The silence on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion stretched for several long minutes after the last Devourer bioship had been reduced to expanding debris. The alien officers stood transfixed by the tactical display, watching human recovery teams efficiently collect salvage and conduct damage assessments with the same clinical professionalism they'd shown during the battle. Admiral Zephyrus' crystalline skin had lost much of its earlier prismatic brilliance, and her 4 eyes reflected something approaching shock. Admiral Harrison, your fleet just destroyed nearly 1,000 hostile vessels in under an hour with minimal losses. 53 minutes, actually, Lieutenant Thompson corrected, consulting his chronometer. And our casualties were lighter than expected. Only 7 ships suffered major damage, and total personnel losses were 412 killed, 863 wounded. The matter-of-fact recitation of what the aliens considered impossibly light casualties only emphasized the gulf between human and galactic military capabilities. General Corps' massive frame seemed to have diminished, and his voice carried a note of bewilderment. How is that possible? We witnessed the complete annihilation of a force that outnumbered your own. In most galactic conflicts, such an engagement would result in mutual destruction at minimum. Harrison gestured toward the main display, where human ships continued their recovery operations. Different tactical doctrines, General. Most galactic navies seem to favor elegant solutions, sophisticated technology, precision strikes, minimal force expenditure. We favor overwhelming superiority applied with maximum efficiency. Captain Chen stepped forward to elaborate. Our entire military philosophy is based on the principle that war should be won as quickly and decisively as possible. Prolonged conflicts consume resources and increase casualties on both sides. Admiral Fexnor's compound eyes focused intently on the human officers. But, such firepower, surely your weapons represent the pinnacle of technological development? Commander Rodriguez chuckled. Actually, Admiral, our weapons are deliberately low-tech by galactic standards. We prioritize reliability, maintainability, and destructive efficiency over technological sophistication. To demonstrate his point, he activated a detailed schematic of a human railgun system. The design was surprisingly simple: magnetic acceleration coils, kinetic projectiles, and targeting computers that were advanced but not exotic by galactic standards. This is our standard naval artillery system, he explained. No exotic particles, no dimensional manipulation, no quantum entanglement targeting. Just magnetic acceleration applied to dense metal projectiles. Fleet Admiral Veltar's energy form pulsed with confusion. But the destructive power we witnessed comes from velocity and mass, Harrison said simply. A 10-kilogram tungsten slug accelerated to 15% of lightspeed carries enough kinetic energy to penetrate any known armor and cause catastrophic structural damage to ships of any size. Admiral Zephyra studied the weapon's schematic with growing amazement. The engineering required to achieve such velocities is well within our capabilities, Captain Chen confirmed. We've been building railgun systems for over a century and a half. Our current generation of naval artillery can maintain sustained rates of fire that would have been impossible with our early designs. Sustained rates of fire, General Corps repeated slowly. How sustained? Lieutenant Thompson consulted his notes again. Our capital ship main batteries can maintain maximum rate of fire for approximately 47 minutes before requiring ammunition replenishment. Smaller vessels can sustain combat operations for several hours. The numbers were staggering. The aliens were accustomed to naval engagements that lasted minutes, with each shot carefully calculated and energy resources carefully managed. The humans had built weapons systems capable of sustained bombardment for nearly an hour without pause. And ammunition supplies? Admiral Fexnor asked weakly. Each major vessel carries sufficient ammunition for extended independent operations, Harrison replied. The Prometheus, for example, can resupply her entire escort group and still maintain full combat capability for several months. The concept of months-long combat operations was alien to most galactic civilizations. Their conflicts were typically resolved through quick, decisive engagements or prolonged diplomatic maneuvering. The idea of fleets designed to fight continuously for extended periods suggested a species that had fundamentally different expectations about the nature of warfare. Admiral Harrison, Admiral Zephyra said carefully, your species' approach to military operations seems extensive. Are all human fleets equipped for such sustained combat? All of them, Harrison confirmed. Every human military unit, from individual soldiers to entire fleet formations, is trained and equipped for independent operations in hostile environments. We learned early that you can't always count on supply lines or reinforcements. To illustrate his point, he activated another display showing human military doctrine. The organizational charts revealed a military structure that emphasized self-sufficiency at every level. Individual ships could operate independently for months, task forces could sustain themselves for years, and entire fleets were essentially mobile civilizations capable of indefinite operation. This is incredible, Fleet Admiral Veltar said, his energy form flickering with amazement. Your military organization resembles a nomadic civilization more than a traditional navy. In many ways, that's exactly what we are, Commander Rodriguez agreed. Human expansion into space has always been driven by military necessity as much as exploration. Our fleets often operate for decades in unexplored regions, establishing bases, defending colonies, and dealing with whatever threats they encounter. Admiral Zephyra was studying the organizational charts with professional interest. The logistics required to support such operations must be enormous. They are, Harrison acknowledged. But we've had 2 centuries to perfect the systems. Every human world contributes to military production, every civilian industry has military applications, and our entire educational system includes mandatory military service. This revelation caused another stir among the alien officers. The concept of mandatory military service was known in galactic civilization, but the scale of human implementation was unprecedented. Every human receives military training? General Corps asked. Every human citizen serves a minimum of 4 years in either military or civil defense roles, Captain Chen explained.
It's considered part of basic education.
Citizens learn engineering, logistics, communications, weapons handling, emergency medical training, and basic combat skills.
The result, Lieutenant Thompson added, is a civilian population that can rapidly mobilize for military support when necessary.
During the hegemony wars, we converted civilian shipping into military transports, civilian factories into weapons production facilities, and civilian communications networks into military command systems within weeks. The aliens were beginning to understand that they weren't just looking at a powerful military force. They were seeing the end result of a civilization that had organized its entire society around the requirements of survival in a hostile universe.
Admiral Harrison, Admiral Zephyr said slowly, what would it take for your species to consider another civilization a genuine military threat?
Harrison considered the question seriously. Technological superiority combined with strategic capability and hostile intent. We'd need to face an enemy with weapons significantly more advanced than ours, the ability to threaten multiple human worlds simultaneously, and clear evidence that they intended our destruction.
Have you ever encountered such a threat? Fleet Admiral Veltar asked.
Twice, Harrison replied grimly. The first was an artificial intelligence that had consumed its creators and was expanding through space using self-replicating warships. The second was a species that weaponized entire star systems and could destroy planets from several light-years away. The casual mention of galaxy-spanning threats that the humans had apparently defeated left the aliens speechless. Such conflicts were the stuff of ancient legends in galactic civilization, not contemporary military history.
What happened to these threats? Admiral Fexnor managed to ask.
The AI was eliminated through the development of quantum virus weapons that could disrupt its core programming, Commander Rodriguez explained.
The war lasted 3 years and required the complete mobilization of human space.
We lost over 2,000 worlds before developing effective countermeasures. The star system weaponizers were neutralized through preemptive strikes, Captain Chen added. We developed faster-than-light weapons specifically to engage them at extreme range.
The conflict was over in 6 months once we achieved technological parity.
General Kor was staring at the humans with something approaching awe.
Your species has fought and won wars against enemies that could destroy planets from interstellar distances?
We've fought and won wars against every type of threat we've encountered, Harrison said simply.
That's what we do. It's what we've always done.
The conversation was interrupted by an incoming transmission from the Galactic Council's administrative center. Admiral Zephyr moved to receive the communication, and her expression became increasingly concerned as she listened.
Admiral Harrison, she said urgently, Council intelligence is reporting unusual activity in the Vorthan sector.
Multiple civilizations are reporting the disappearance of entire star systems. Harrison's demeanor immediately became more alert.
Disappearance? Define that term.
Star systems going dark simultaneously, Admiral Zephyr explained. All communication ceases, all navigation beacons stop transmitting, and subsequent investigation reveals empty space where inhabited worlds once existed. The human officers exchanged glances that conveyed volumes of unspoken communication. Harrison activated his communicator immediately.
Harrison to Fleet Intelligence.
Priority analysis required.
Galactic Council is reporting star system disappearances in the Vorthan sector.
Begin immediate investigation and threat assessment.
Acknowledged, Admiral, came the immediate response.
Deploying reconnaissance assets to investigate reported disappearances. Initial analysis should be available within 2 hours.
Admiral Fexnor's mandibles clicked nervously. Admiral, do you recognize this type of threat?
Possibly, Harrison said grimly. The systematic elimination of star systems suggests either advanced stellar engineering capabilities or weapons that can cause stellar collapse.
Both represent significant threats to galactic civilization. What do you recommend? Admiral Zephyr asked.
Full mobilization of available Council forces and immediate consultation with human high command, Harrison replied without hesitation. If we're dealing with a species capable of destroying star systems, this becomes a survival situation for every civilization in the galaxy.
Fleet Admiral Veltar's energy form pulsed rapidly. Surely you don't mean to suggest that the entire Galactic Council is at risk?
I'm suggesting that any species capable of eliminating star systems it will represents an existential threat to all spacefaring life, Harrison said bluntly. This is exactly the type of situation our military forces were designed to address. As human reconnaissance ships began accelerating toward the Vorthan sector at velocities that strained the laws of physics, the aliens aboard the Eternal Dominion realized that their introduction to human military capabilities was far from over. They'd witnessed the destruction of the Devourer fleet and learned about humanity's history of constant warfare, but now they were about to see what happened when the human war machine was faced with a threat to galactic civilization itself. Admiral Harrison, Admiral Zephyr said quietly, "What do you need from the Galactic Council?" "Everything," Harrison replied. "Every ship, every resource, every piece of information you can provide. If we're right about this threat, the next few weeks will determine whether galactic civilization survives or becomes another empty sector of space." The transformation of Admiral Harrison from diplomatic visitor to military commander was complete, and the aliens could see the steel beneath the professional courtesy. This was a man who had spent his entire career preparing for threats that could end civilizations, and his calm acceptance of the crisis spoke volumes about human military psychology. As emergency communications began flooding in from across the galaxy, confirming more star system disappearances and providing increasingly disturbing details about the scope of the threat, the assembled alien officers realized they were about to witness the full mobilization of human military power for the first time in galactic history. The demonstration they'd received was nothing compared to what was coming. The next 6 hours transformed the diplomatic station into the nerve center of the greatest military mobilization in galactic history. Admiral Harrison had established a direct communication link with human high command, and the response had been swift and overwhelming. Reports flooded in from across human space as the entire military apparatus shifted into crisis mode. Update from Fleet Command, Commander Rodriguez announced, monitoring the constant stream of incoming data. 1st, 2nd, 4th, 5th, and 7th fleets are moving to rally points. Home defense forces are assuming maximum alert status. Colonial militias are activating reserve units across 347 worlds. Admiral Zephyr watched the mobilization reports with growing amazement. The numbers were beyond comprehension: millions of ships, hundreds of millions of personnel, industrial capabilities that span hundreds of star systems, all shifting into wartime production within hours of the initial threat assessment. "How many ships are you mobilizing?" she asked Harrison. "Everything," Harrison replied simply. "Current estimates suggest we'll have approximately 60,000 combat vessels in the operational area within 72 hours. Full mobilization should give us close to 120,000 ships within 2 weeks." The alien officers had stopped trying to process the numbers. 120,000 warships represented more military power than had ever been assembled in galactic history. The combined fleets of every known civilization couldn't match even half of what humanity was preparing to deploy. "Admiral," General Corps said weakly, "surely such mobilization is excessive? We don't even know the nature of the threat yet." Harrison looked at the massive reptilian officer with something approaching pity. "General, in the past 6 hours, 17 star systems have gone dark. That's 17 billion people who have simply ceased to exist. Whatever we're facing has already demonstrated the capability to eliminate entire civilizations within minutes." The reconnaissance reports from the Vorthan sector had been disturbing in the extreme. Human scout ships equipped with faster-than-light sensors had confirmed the complete absence of matter where inhabited star systems had existed just days earlier. Not just the planets, the stars themselves had been eliminated, leaving nothing but empty space and fading gravitational echoes. Current analysis suggests we're dealing with a species that has weaponized vacuum decay or developed some form of matter dissolution technology, Lieutenant Thompson reported, reading from the latest intelligence summaries. "Whatever method they're using, it appears to eliminate matter at the atomic level across vast distances." Fleet Admiral Veltar's energy form flickered with terror. "Elimination of matter at the atomic level? That's impossible. The energy requirements alone would be impossible by conventional physics," Harrison agreed. "Which suggests we're dealing with a post-singular civilization or artificial intelligence that has achieved technological capabilities beyond our current understanding." The implications were staggering. Humanity had fought and defeated various advanced threats throughout their expansion, but this represented something entirely different. An enemy that could eliminate matter itself was beyond any conventional military response. "So what do you propose to do?" Admiral Thexnor asked, his mandibles clicking with nervous energy. "What we always do," Harrison replied grimly. Find their weakness, develop countermeasures, and destroy them before they can eliminate galactic civilization. As if to emphasize his point, new reports began arriving from human research facilities. Scientists and military engineers across human space were already analyzing the reconnaissance data, developing theories about the enemy's capabilities, and proposing potential countermeasures.
Preliminary analysis from the Titan Research Institute, Commander Rodriguez announced.
They believe the matter elimination is being accomplished through controlled quantum field manipulation. In theory, such manipulation could be disrupted by specific frequency jamming or quantum field destabilization.
How long to develop countermeasures? Harrison asked. Unknown, sir. The research teams are requesting access to any available samples of the effect or direct observation opportunities.
Harrison nodded and activated his fleet communication system.
All reconnaissance units, new mission parameters.
I need sensor data on the elimination effect in progress.
Find me a star system that's currently being attacked.
The orders sent dozens of human scout ships racing toward the expanding zone of destruction, their crews volunteering for what amounted to suicide missions in order to gather the data necessary to develop defensive measures. Admiral Zephyr said urgently, "You're sending ships directly into areas where entire star systems are being eliminated." "I'm sending volunteers to gather intelligence that might save galactic civilization," Harrison corrected. Every human ship in the reconnaissance fleet volunteered for the mission within minutes of the call going out. The casual mention of volunteers for certain death spoke volumes about human military culture. These weren't conscripts being ordered into hopeless situations, they were professional warriors who understood the stakes and accepted the risks as part of their duty.
Within 2 hours, the first direct observation data began arriving.
The scout ship UES Intrepid had positioned itself at maximum sensor range from a system undergoing elimination and transmitted detailed readings of the process before being consumed by the expanding field of destruction.
Analysis complete, Rodriguez reported grimly.
The enemy is using coordinated quantum field generators to create cascading vacuum decay. The effect spreads at approximately 1/3 light speed and eliminates all matter within the affected space.
Countermeasures? Harrison demanded.
Theoretical at this point, but the research teams believe that quantum field stabilizers operating at specific frequencies might be able to disrupt the decay cascade. The problem is scale. We'd need stabilizers powerful enough to affect interstellar distances. Harrison was already considering the implications.
Engineering feasibility? Unknown, sir.
The power requirements would be enormous, and we'd need to develop the technology from scratch.
Estimated development time is measured in years.
We don't have years, Harrison said flatly.
What about alternative approaches? Lieutenant Thompson looked up from his analysis station.
Sir, there's a possibility that the quantum generators creating the effect might be vulnerable to direct attack. If we could locate and destroy the source, the field collapse might stop.
Range and location of the source? Unknown, sir. The generators could be located anywhere within several light-years of the affected systems. And, given the power output, they're probably heavily defended. Harrison studied the tactical displays showing the expanding zone of destruction.
Dozens of star systems had already been eliminated, and the effect was spreading toward inhabited space at a terrifying rate.
At current expansion rates, major population centers would begin disappearing within weeks. All fleet commanders, new operational parameters, Harrison announced over the communication system. Mission is now search and destroy.
We're looking for quantum field generators capable of stellar-scale matter elimination. Assume maximum enemy defensive capabilities and plan accordingly. The response from the human fleet commanders was immediate and unanimous, acknowledged, Admiral.
Beginning search patterns now.
60,000 human warships began spreading across an enormous volume of space, their sensors scanning for any trace of the technology responsible for the star system eliminations.
The search pattern covered thousands of light-years and represented the largest military operation in human history.
Admiral Zephyr said quietly, "Your species is risking everything on the possibility that this enemy has a discoverable weakness." "Every enemy has a weakness," Harrison replied with absolute conviction. "It's just a matter of finding it and exploiting it effectively." The confidence in his voice was unshakable. This was a man who represented a species that had faced extinction multiple times and survived through determination, ingenuity, and an absolute refusal to accept defeat.
As the hours passed, the search continued with methodical precision.
Human ships probed deep space, investigated anomalous readings, and followed every possible lead. The coordination required for such an operation would have been impossible for any other galactic civilization, but humanity had spent 2 centuries perfecting the art of large-scale military logistics. Contact, came a report from Task Force Epsilon.
Anomalous quantum signature detected in the Kepler sector.
Configuration unknown but consistent with theoretical projections for field generation equipment.
Distance and defensive capabilities? Harrison demanded. Approximately 400 light-years from the current elimination zone.
Massive artificial structure, possibly artificial planet or constructed habitat. Energy output consistent with star-level power generation. Defensive systems unknown but presumed extensive.
Harrison nodded grimly. All fleets, converge on Kepler sector coordinates. We've found our target.
The mobilization of the entire human military toward a single objective was a sight that would be remembered for millennia. 100,000 warships began converging on a single point in space, their faster-than-light drives pushing the boundaries of known physics in their urgency to reach the target before more civilizations could be eliminated. "Admiral," General Corps said, his massive frame trembling slightly, "you're committing your entire military to an attack on a target of unknown capabilities.
What if it's a trap?"
"Then, we spring it," Harrison replied simply. "General, in our experience, the only way to deal with an existential threat is to attack it with everything you have.
Half measures get civilizations eliminated."
As the human fleets approached the Kepler sector, long-range sensors began revealing details about their target. The structure was indeed artificial, a constructed habitat the size of a small planet, surrounded by defensive installations that defied easy classification. Energy readings suggested power generation capabilities that matched the output of multiple stars, and the quantum signatures indicated technology that operated on principles beyond current galactic understanding. "Target analysis complete," Lieutenant Thompson reported.
"Artificial construct approximately 12,000 kilometers in diameter.
Defensive systems include energy barriers, automated weapon platforms, and what appear to be secondary quantum field generators for point defense.
Estimated defensive capability, extreme.
Estimated casualties for a direct assault?"
Harrison asked. "Significant, sir.
Possibly 20 to 30% fleet losses even with coordinated attack."
Harrison nodded acceptance of the projection.
20 to 30,000 ships destroyed, millions of casualties, but, weighed against the elimination of galactic civilization, the cost was acceptable. "All fleet commanders, prepare for coordinated assault," Harrison announced. "Target is heavily defended but represents the source of the threat to galactic civilization.
Mission parameters are simple: destroy the facility and eliminate the threat, regardless of cost."
The response from across the human fleet was immediate and unified, acknowledged, "Admiral."
Ready to engage. Admiral Zephyra watched the final preparations with amazement and terror.
The humans were about to launch the largest military assault in galactic history against a target that could eliminate matter at the atomic level, and they were approaching it as a routine military problem to be solved through applied violence. "Admiral Harrison," she said quietly, "your species' commitment to this attack is extraordinary." "Our species' commitment to survival is absolute," Harrison corrected. "We've learned that when faced with extinction, the only acceptable response is to ensure that your enemy faces extinction first." As the human fleets achieved final attack positions and prepared to assault the alien construct, the assembled observers realized they were about to witness the culmination of 2 centuries of human military evolution. Everything that humanity had learned about warfare, every weapon they had developed, every tactical doctrine they had perfected, was about to be tested against an enemy that possessed the ultimate weapon. The battle for galactic civilization was about to begin, and humanity was ready to pay any price necessary to ensure that life itself survived among the stars.